Good evening, everyone. I would like to call the April 20th work session of the Croton-Harmon Board of Education to order. Hope everyone had a great day today as our first day back 5 days a week for our students in our schools. And so I hope our students and our staff and faculty all had a fantastic day. Before we move into approving the agenda, I'm actually going to hand this off to Neil Haber for a moment, who wanted to make a statement.
Thank you, Sarah. I wanted to make give a few remarks about the death of a Croton resident, and more significantly, someone who I think really can say is was a wonderful Croton community member. I'm speaking about Nick Springer. Those of you who may not know Nick, and I knew Nick personally, Nick grew up in Croton. He was a graduate of Croton-Harmon High School. At the age of 14, right before he started high school, he had been intending to go to Stepinac High School and play hockey. When he was at summer camp, he contracted meningococcal meningitis, and after being rushed to the hospital, ended up with having surgical removal of both of his arms at the mid forearm and both of his legs at the knees. That is something that we in the community rallied around Nick and felt we didn't know what would happen, but that never deterred him. It never stopped him. He attended high school, graduated from Croton-Harmon High School, and then went to college in Florida at Eckerd College and began his career in athletics. When I'm talking about a career in athletics, he swam, did scuba diving, snowboarding, he played sled hockey and rugby, Paralympic rugby. And he was known in the international rugby community as a international star. He won 6 international gold medals, including a gold at the 2008 Beijing Paralympics, and also won a bronze at the 2012 London Paralympics. In addition to his sports activities, he was a spokesman for the National Meningitis Association, which was co-founded by his mother, and he consulted for pharmaceutical companies and did education about meningitis vaccinations and their importance. And Nick traveled all over the world in that. I mean, you can imagine that someone who is a quadruple amputee would have difficulties traveling all around the world, getting on planes, trains, international travel. It never deterred him, actually, to the point that he said, I don't want an electric wheelchair. He had his own wheelchair. He managed by himself. And, I had seen him getting into cars, commuting on Metro North, and just being totally self-sufficient, totally on his own. And he loved Croton. He loved our school system. He frequently spoke to our students and was an inspiration for our students and for our community. And looking at the outpouring of sentiments that I've seen over the last few days from members of the Croton-Harmon school community, members of the Croton community, members of people who he knew throughout the world, it just struck me that he was an inspiration for everybody and someone who we in our community should never forget and should strive to have a positive attitude despite any of our encumbrances or difficulties that we have, to make the best for everyone. And that was Nick. I think we should all appreciate Nick as a member of our Croton and Croton-Harmon School District community.
Thank you very much, Neil. That was beautifully said. I also, before we move on to the approval, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. O'Connell for a brief moment as well.
Thank you, Sarah. And Neil, that was absolutely just so beautiful. So sorry, I'm a little choked up. Certainly epitomized the profile of the Croton-Harmon graduate. I do not have a formal superintendent report this evening, but I would like to take a moment to just share that we want to acknowledge that the verdict was reached in the Derek Chauvin trial for the death of George Floyd this afternoon. I would like to stress that our schools are a space for our students to share their thoughts, and that our middle and high school staff are available in case students need to continue processing this new information. Our counseling staff is also ready to provide support to students and staff should there be a need. And I'd like to end with just sharing some positive, happy news. I did receive word right before the meeting that our volleyball team won the regional semifinals. We upset Haldane, who were the #1 seed. So we play Panis this Thursday for the small school regional championship. So again, thank you for allowing me some time to speak this evening.
Thank you very much, Dr. O'Connell. All right, and with that, recommended action that the Board of Education approves the agenda as presented.
So moved.
Second.
On the question? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Oppose? Abstain? Motion carries. All right, and first up, we'll move into new business, and we have a policy for first reading. Neil, if you wanted to take a moment on that.
Sure. A moment very briefly. As the board and the community knows, or certainly the community will know shortly, on the ballot at the annual meeting is a proposition for the voter approval of the establishment of an ex officio student trustee position as a member of the board. In advance of the vote by the voters, which will be on May 18th, we have prepared a policy that would set forth the selection manner, duties, responsibilities, and limitations of authority of the student trustee. That policy is on the agenda for first reading, and it's available to the public, I believe. Let me double check. I think it's in public comment. I'm right. Public documents, which will only be moved forward for second reading and adoption if the voters vote in favor of the proposition on the ballot. We felt as a committee that it was important so that everyone have the understanding of what this position entailed as they consider whether or not to support the establishment of the position. And so if there are any questions among the board or any questions on the public about what is contained in that policy, certainly, hold on just one second. Certainly, contact the policy committee, myself, contact our board officers, and we will be able to consider input.
Great. Thank you very much, Neil. And yes, I did want to just confirm for you that the policy is in
I
in
see
the
it now.
agenda.
That's why I was looking away. So,
Great.
fine.
All right, and we'll move on to 2.2. Recommended action that the Board of Education approves the 2021-2022 property tax report card for the Croton-Harmon Union Free School District as presented. Neil is going to move it, or do you have a question? Neil's moving it. All right, can I get a second?
Second.
All right, on the question. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Oppose? Abstain? Motion carries. Recommended action that the Board of Education adopts the 2021-2022 Croton Harmon Union Free School District budget in the amount of $50,775,098.
So
Neil has
moved.
moved it. Can I get a
Second.
second? All right, on the question, or actually before we move to do our final votes, Denise, did you want to, I see you have a presentation here for us.
I do. Sarah, shall I begin?
Yes, please.
Okay. So welcome, everyone. This is the evening when we present the budget for adoption. This is a quite unique budget this year, so the presentation will be a little bit longer than typical. I just ask for your patience. We have a lot to cover here. But before I begin, I'd just like to thank the community and administration for all of their input and collaborative support during this process. It, as you know, is a very iterative process, certainly amidst COVID and a late arrival of our state budget. But without further ado, I will begin. So I'm going to begin with federal funding. So as a lot of people have heard, the federal government has allocated considerable funds to school districts. So the first funding came through the CARES Act. The CARES Act was for, one second, just let me widen my screen here. The CARES Act was monies that were captured in our operating budget, so our general fund budget for this fiscal year. It was to cover COVID expenses and mitigation. The allocation was derived from our Title I funding from 2019. The second funding that came in was the CRISA, or also called CARES 2. This is through a federal grant process, does not impact our general fund budget whatsoever. The usage of these funds is from March of 2020 through September of 2024. It addresses, these funds are to address learning loss, potential infrastructure, and other mitigation factors related to COVID. And these funds were allocated through our 2020 Title I. The last funding came from, and I think I have actually I have a date there. I believe CRISA is through 2023, and American Rescue Plan is through 2024. Again, 20% of the American Rescue funds, amounting to $566,000, need to directly be allocated towards learning loss. So this is the $134,000 has already been spent in the 2021 budget. So we'll be filing our final cost reports for that in several months. But the CRISA and the American Rescue Plan, districts are now just convening to try to determine the appropriate use of these funds. Again, these are one-time funds that we don't want to utilize to support ongoing expenditures. So this is a wonderful gift to school districts, and now we need to determine the most appropriate and sustainable way to utilize them. Please let me know if you have any questions. The next slide we're going to get into is our enrollment. Now, this is probably our 6th or 7th budget presentation, so I won't go into too much detail. But the wild card here this year is our homeschool students. So we have about 50 homeschool students that could impact our class size considerably. In addition to that, we have a booming real estate market. So we could have additional students moving into the community. Our kindergarten numbers could change drastically. So we are watching these numbers daily. General fund revenues. I just wanted to begin by just going over the allowable growth factor and the tax-based growth factor. So as you can see here, the CPI went down to 1.23 this year, which was, last year it was at 1.81. That resulted in a considerable loss in our tax levy growth. In addition to that, our tax-based growth factor went down from 1.56 to 1.0022. So that was a considerable loss. The two together resulted in over $300,000 loss in growth to our tax levy. Oops, I'm sorry, I put my pointer on and now I can't change the slide. Here we go. So here we go with our tax levy calculation. So if you notice the one on the far right, that is the tax-based growth factor. And the second one is our allowable growth factor. Those are the primary adjusters for growth, and they were considerably suppressed this year, resulting in a 1.43 tax levy increase that is equal to $583,000. Now, I will tell you, last year, our tax levy was over $600,000, and that was after the board had reduced the levy by $100,000. So that just can give you an idea of how much our growth was suppressed by our tax-based growth factor and the CPI for this year. So that results in a tax levy percentage increase of 1.43, and I will say that is one of the lowest in the county as of last Friday. So now we'll take a look at the revenue budget. So there are two lines that have changed since our last discussion, and that is line number 2 and line number F. So line number 2 represents the restoration of fund balance. So in the legislative budget, they have restored foundation aid considerably. So Croton Harmon received an additional $413,000 in foundation aid. So what that did essentially is it increased line 2, the state aid of $6,098,292. It increased that and then reduced line F, which is the additional gap in fund balance that we had to put forward to fund the gap between revenues and expenditures. In our last meeting, line F at $443,000 was equal to close to $900,000. So this infusion of foundation aid and a little additional monies in transportation aid amounted to a reduction in that gap of $500,000. Leaving us with line 5, our revenue budget of $50,755,098, and a revenue budget increase of 2.73%. General fund expenditures. This is our general support budget. It supports maintenance operations, our assessments, general administration, our fiscal advisors, legal, etc. The primary growth here had to do with, pardon me. My machine is not cooperating. Here we go. So the primary growth is here related to facilities expenditures related to COVID, and that was a considerable increase to that account. Next, we have our instructional budget. This includes everything that we need to support our classroom instruction, teachers, athletics, co-curricular, our social and emotional services, instructional media, our special education programs, etc. And then we have our transportation benefits and debt service. So as you can see, our benefits and debt service and interfund transfers went up almost 6%. That's primarily related to our benefits and our debt service. So next year we will be making our first payment on the bond for our $20.82 million construction that occurred and was completed last year. This is just a summary overview. So budget to budget, we're looking at a 2.73 increase. This is a very busy screen. I will just show you that this is, these are our levy calculations, looking at our equalization rates and assessed property values. The county equalization rates for both Cortland and Yorktown went down this year. And that was actually a good thing for us because we look at the equalization rates. If you are a resident of Cortland at a market value home of $500,000, you will be looking at a estimated tax increase for the year of $38. And Yorktown, it was a negative 106, and that's primarily due to the significantly higher equalization rate in Yorktown. Reserves and fund balance. This is just a look at our fund balance amounts. We just completed the March 31st fund balance projection. And again, we're a long way away from June 30th. So I would not count on this number too much. There's a lot at play, but our fund balance is trending in the positive of close to $1 million at $910,000. So we will be watching that at the end of the year. In May or June, we will allocate a certain number of those, a certain amount to each of our reserves if the funds are available. What you will see at the polls. Get ready. Okay. Here we go. This is our sample ballot, and you don't need to read anything. I'm just going to give you a brief overview. So this section right here is the budget. This middle section right here are the 4 transportation propositions. This is the state aid. This is the vote for the energy performance contract. So as if the community votes positively for that, we will receive an additional 10% in state aid. And that is a significant amount of money. I have it written down. I just put it down somewhere. It's close to about $350,000 in additional building aid just to put it on the ballot. So some districts choose to put it on, some don't. We chose to put it on in hopes of receiving that additional $300,000 in aid. This is for the library levy. We do not prepare the library's budget, but it is on our ballot, and you'll see that right in the center there. Then we have our student ex officio trustee. And then on the lower portion, we have our candidates for the Board of Education trustee elections. So a lot of talk about the transportation propositions. I'm going to go through them, and I would please ask that if anyone has any questions, I'm just going to move that over there, to please feel free to jump in. So the first proposition, Our first proposition is for 2 fossil fuel minibuses and 1 EV charger. We place the EV charger in Proposition 1 because all other propositions are contingent on the passage of Proposition 1. In order to support our student transport needs for the 21-22 school year, we need to have at least 2 minibuses in order to support that. We could not do without them. They are essential vehicles. Therefore, as a safety net, we put them in Proposition 1 with the electric vehicle charger. All propositions following this proposition are contingent on the passage of Proposition 1 to ensure that we would have the vehicles needed to transport our students. If Proposition 1 passes and Proposition 2 passes, now Proposition 2 is for a 66-passenger electric bus. It is contingent on the passage of Proposition 1. And it is also, the purchase is contingent on, of course, voter approval, and finally on the availability of grant funding. So Proposition 2, as you'll see on the ballot, is anticipates funding from NYSERDA of $120,000. So providing that funding is available, and Proposition 1 and Proposition 2 pass, and also Proposition 3 and 4 pass. I apologize. I actually had another slide in front of this, and it just, I think I might have deleted it accidentally. I apologize, but I'll make sure that it's in the PowerPoint. So if all 3 propositions pass, we have, again, Proposition 1, which has 2 fossil fuel vehicles and an electric charger. Proposition 2 is a 66-passenger electric vehicle. Proposition 3 is for an electric minibus, and Proposition 4 is for a second electric minibus. If all 3 propositions pass and we receive
Four
All
propositions.
4.
sorry, all 4,
Yeah.
yes, all 4 propositions pass and we receive grant funding, the district intends to forego the purchase of the 2 fossil fuel vehicles and through Proposition 1 only purchase the electric charger, and then will purchase the 66-passenger bus and the 2 electric minibuses. So the maximum number of vehicles that we will purchase is 3. The next scenario, Proposition 1 passes, Proposition 2 passes, and Proposition 3 and 4 fail. The district will purchase the electric charger, the 66-passenger bus, and 2 of the gas fossil fuel vehicles that are essential to the transporting of our students.
And to be clear, the 66-passenger bus is an electric bus.
Correct. Thank you. If Proposition 1 passes, Proposition 2 for the 66-passenger bus fails, and Proposition 3 and or 4 pass, the district will purchase the electric charger, 1 electric minibus, and 1 fossil fuel minibus. Because remember, and at the end of the day, we need 2 minibuses. Ideally, well, if all propositions pass, we will purchase 2 electric vehicles as opposed to the fossil fuel vehicles. Lastly, if Proposition 1 passes and Proposition 2 passes, and either Proposition 3 or 4 pass, then we will purchase the 66-passenger bus, the charger, 1 electric minibus, and 1 fossil fuel bus.
Denise, a couple of things. The first is, there really is another scenario that you don't have in which all 4 of them would be green.
The top row is all four. That's everything. That's Prop 3.
Oh, I see. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So the other thing that I think we should make clear is that in addition to the passage of the propositions, and you said it before, but I think we should reiterate it, it
Please.
will also mean that the receipt of the grant funding through NYSERDA or other grant sources, as is set forth in the text of the proposition. So if we were in a situation, correct me if I'm wrong, where all the propositions pass, but there is no grant funding, we are not going to be able to immediately take the second row and buy the electric buses because we won't have the money through the grants. Is that right?
That is correct, Neil.
Okay. And the other thing, because you have this at the top with an asterisk, and you perhaps were talking about that, but planning to talk about that, is the district, if Proposition 1 fails, the district will need to determine how to fund the necessary vehicles through the general fund budget. Can you explain for the public what that means in terms of funding the necessary vehicles through the general fund budget?
So, so Neil, if the proposition does not pass, we will have to purchase or lease a vehicle. The only funds that we could utilize to do that would have to come out of our general fund budget. So it would have to impact our very lean operating budget.
Denise, it would be two vehicles though, right? Not just one. It would be two
Correct.
buses.
It
Okay.
would be two vehicles.
And to make sure that we are clear on that, Proposition 1 talks about the purchase of the two mini vehicles at a total cost of a maximum cost of approximately $115,000. So what that would mean in essence is that if Proposition 1 fails and we decide to buy a bus, or two buses rather, we would have to find that $115,000 out of general operating expenses, be they staffing expenses or some other expense that would then have to be transferred. And if we lease, we would have to enter into a lease and find the money to pay for the lease again out of operating funds. I got that right?
That is
Okay.
correct, Neil.
One thing I just wanted to clarify too is because I've heard people in the public, they don't actually have all the correct information, ask if this transportation bond goes down, will there be a chance for another election before next year about just the transportation or transportation needs?
That's a very good question, Andrea. We haven't discussed that.
Well, I mean, I'm assuming that we wouldn't because we've never had a side election on a particular issue. But I just want to clarify that this basically is the public's choice this year, and then it'll come back again. There'll be a choice next year, but it's now or next year really are the choices for the public.
And I would add, as far as
Correct.
that's
And then-
concerned. Yeah. Go ahead.
And then every time we postpone a purchase, it's like kicking the can down the road. It's going to catch up, and any postponement is going to further throw off our replacement cycle plan. And that's when you see spikes in purchases. So you'll have, several buses fail and need to purchase 3, 4, 5 buses at one time. So yes.
I think that's the most critical piece. We have been able to keep it level over the years because of being, following our vehicle replacement plan. So that's a critical component here.
And so I think what, to point out, as we understand it from our prior discussions, is number one, as you've said, we would then, a year from now, either we would have purchased 2 gas buses minibuses out of our operating fund, with operating budget, which then would mean we would be up to date on vehicle replacement, but we would harm education. And if we were able to defer because we leased those buses, and that would be a decision of the board, then next year we would be looking at purchasing, as Dr. O'Connell said, 4 or 5 or however many buses would be needed. And we would be having this same discussion, and we don't know what would be available to us as far as funds next year. We still don't know. And we don't know if prices are going to go down. I would also add that to answer Andrea's question, we have had mid-year referenda, such as building referenda over the years. But in terms of timing, if the voters were to vote Proposition 1 down, we still are going to need to make arrangements for transportation for next year. So I'm not sure, even if we had another referendum, and then the voters voted in favor of Proposition 1 and perhaps others, even setting aside the cost of running another vote, we would still be left with the question of, come August 30th, when we have to transport students, do we have the 2 minibuses that we need? And so that all factors into how we look at our situation and how we would proceed, I think, if the voters do not approve Proposition 1. And that's up to the voters to decide.
Yeah, I think that the choices are relatively clear, and I'm not sure that hypothesizing about future possibilities is clarifying. It may be slightly confusing, but basically these are the choices now, and I think they are clear according to this graphic.
Right. And it gave us the opportunity to give our voters options as to the speed at which we would be introducing electric vehicles. So it's complicated, but it's for a very, very good reason. Again, if Proposition 1 must pass in order for all other propositions to pass. If it does not pass, those monies will need to be drawn from our operating budget in order to support the purchase of those transportation vehicles. Proposition 2, 3, and 4 are contingent on grant funding and vehicle availability. The maximum, just to be clear, the maximum number of vehicles that the district would purchase if all propositions pass would be 3. And it would be the electric bus and the 2 electric minibuses if all were to pass, and the charger. And then lastly, all vehicle purchase receive transportation aid at approximately 35%. So where the cost of those 3 vehicles is about $573,000, we would receive an additional $200,000 in state aid next year to support those purchases.
Denise, can I ask a couple of questions? The first is that state aid would come in future years, so it would not go towards spending, towards purchasing the bus. It would just be additional state aid that would come once again if Governor Cuomo in next year, includes that and doesn't try to get rid of categorical aid. Another issue. The other question is it correct that state aid would be provided even if we purchase through the general fund budget?
Correct.
Okay, because even if we do certain as I recall, if we do certain building renovation activities through the general fund rather than through the capital fund, we cannot get state aid, or there's some limitation. Am I right?
Yes, and with transportation, it's not a straight path either, I will tell you.
Okay. We don't need to go through that further now. I got it.
So just a brief overview of the propositions. You will see first, you'll see the school budget. Then you will see the 4 transportation propositions. And this is the way they're laid out on the budget as well. Then the additional 10% for our energy performance contract, the library budget, ex officio student board of education, and then the 3 board of trustee seats. Some budget highlights. Maintains a robust instructional program and continues our strong co-curricular and athletic programs. Provides funding for professional development, equity, diversity, and inclusion, and social and emotional wellness. Supports the physical, social, and emotionally safety. Maintains a budget within the allowable tax levy to ensure sustainability for the district and our community. Meets 21-22 operating standards and is responsive to Board of Education goals and our strategic coherence plan. Brief overview, the proposed budget at $57,750,098 is a 2.73% budget to budget increase, and the proposed levy is a 1.43% increase, and that is with the infusion of $2.73199 million in fund balance and reserves that the district is putting forth to balance the budget. Next, contingency budget. So a contingency budget is if the budget were not to pass. So if it were approved, the far left, then the budget would be adopted. If it was disapproved, then we would either go to a contingency budget, and a contingency budget cannot exceed the prior year levy. So the prior year levy was $583,555 less than this current levy. So we would not be able to exceed that. Those monies would have to come from either additional fund balance, or we would have to endure budget cuts. The other option is that we would have a second vote on June 15th, in which if it were approved, it would be adopted. And if not, we would then go to mandatory contingency. Just some voter information here. Voter status may be checked by contacting Tracy Borges, and her extension and email are there. To be eligible to vote on May 18th, residents must be registered for the general political election and with the school district, or have voted within the past 4 years of the election. And they must be U.S. citizens and residents for at least 30 days and 18 years of age. You can register with Tracy. We have actually a special registration, which will be held the day after tomorrow, Thursday, April 22nd, between the hours of 4 and 8 p.m. at the district office located by CET at 10 Gerstein Street. Applications for absentee ballots are also available through Tracy. And state education law prohibits absentee registration. Just some upcoming dates. The dates on the left are some of our prior budget sessions. On the right, you see we're on April 20th right now. April 6th will be our official budget hearing. And then May 18th will be voting day at Croton Harmon High School. And
That's May 6th?
May 6th, yeah. Not April 6th, May 6th will be our public budget hearing.
Oh, yes, May 6th is a budget hearing, thank you. And then May 18th for the vote. I encourage everyone to visit our website. All of our budget materials are on the website. We are also in the midst of preparing some very elaborate communications regarding the budget, the ballot, and the propositions. We have a Q&A coming out with questions and answers about the budget and our propositions. We also have a fact sheet coming out, which is just some of the highlights of our budget. And then we have actually a proposition fact sheet, which kind of walks you through the propositions. Those will be on our website. We will push those out through social media and also possibly a K-12 alert. Vote May 18th, Croton Harmon High School, 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. And questions?
Any questions for Denise? Neil?
I don't have a question, but just a point of clarification, which is probably more about, well, which is more about the selection of trustees. I think that it's, in case anyone is not clear about it, there is one current vacancy as well as 2 vacancies that will occur as of July 1st, 2021. So the third place finisher in the vote, for which there are 8 candidates who filed petitions, the third place finisher will be slotted into that vacancy, which is for a term beginning immediately because it's vacant and going through June 30th, 2023. So while the voters are voting for up to 3, the third place finisher will be in a somewhat different position than the first and second place finishers. And I think that should just make sure that everybody's clear about that.
And so it is our intention that we would likely convene a special meeting of the board on May 19th to certify the results and also to swear in that new member of the board. Does anyone have any other questions for Denise? All right, then. I guess then we've already moved and seconded. So all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Oppose?
Aye.
Oppose? Abstain? Motion carries. Thank you very much for providing us with the latest updates with regard to the numbers, foundation need, and everything like that. So thank you very much, Denise.
Sure. And also we have our email is budget.questions.org. I mean, budget.questions@chufsd.org if anyone has any questions. And Tracy, I'm having difficulty unsharing.
I'll unshare
Can you help me out there? Thanks so much.
Great. Thank you very much. And you can find that email address also on our website if you go to budget information on our website as well. So, all right. With that, we will move into.
Hold on, Denise, I can't unstop. I can't unshare you, Denise.
Aye.
Oh, boy.
Hold on.
Yeah.
All right.
Uh,
Okay,
There we go.
I've got you.
I got it. Yep.
All right. So now we will move into 2.4. Recommended action that the Board of Education adopts the 2021-2022. I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong thing here. Sorry. Recommended action that the Board of Education approves the resolution for the 2021-2022 BOCES administrative budget as presented.
So moved.
Second.
On the question? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Oppose? Abstain?
I was an
Motion-
aye.
That was not. Thank you.
Yeah,
very
mine
much.
was an aye also.
Thank
Yeah.
you. All right. Motion carries. And Now we will move into 2.5. Recommended action that the Board of Education cast one vote for each of the two vacancies to be filled, provided that no more than one vote may be cast for any candidate as defined below.
So moved.
Second.
On the question?
I would just like to point out that the two individuals who are candidates are incumbents. Certainly in my interactions, I think our interactions with BOCES, I have not seen, I think they have served well, and I certainly would support them for reelection.
Thank you, Neil. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Oppose, abstain, motion carries. And so now we will move into ongoing business. And 3.1, recommended action that the Board of Education approves the placement of lending libraries at the Carrie E. Tompkins Elementary School as presented.
So moved.
Second.
On the question? All in favor? Oh, Neil, did you have a
Aye.
question?
No, I just think that one thing that we should point out, because we did have a discussion about this, is that, as I understand it, the location of the lending libraries have been moved from the outside CET to inside CET. And that was reviewed by administration and other insurance and whatever else, and that was a decision that was made. So if people recall our discussion from last time, that change has been made so that they understand why this and how this comes back up.
Thank you very much. Yes, that is correct, Neil. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Oppose, abstain, motion carries. All right, we'll now move into donations. Recommended action that the Board of Education gratefully accepts a donation in the amount of $2,000 from Croton EMS as a contribution to the Charles A. Ellison Scholarship at the Croton Harmon High School.
So moved.
Second.
On the question? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Oppose, abstain, motion carries. Recommended action that the Board of Education gratefully accepts the following donations as contributions to the Mark E. DeGroat Scholarship at the Croton Harmon High School. A donation from AKB Realty Group in the amount of $200. A donation from Tammy and Evan LaBelle in the amount of $200. A donation from Robert Nolan and Valerie Wolpert in the amount of $1,000. A donation from George Steidehar and Sheila Kelly in the amount of $200.
So moved.
Second.
On the question?
On the question, two things. On the agenda, I would like Mr. Nolan's name spelled correctly, Nolan.
We will correct that.
Secondly, yep, and I just thought that I would add that for those who don't know, Mark DeGroat was a member of the community. His children went to our schools, who tragically passed away at the age of around 40. And he is someone who is very important as a member of the community during his life. And it is very wonderful, and to my feeling, that even though he passed away many years ago, he is still remembered by us and honored by his friends.
Thank you, Neil. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Oppose, abstain, motion carries. And thank you again to all of our donors. We so very much appreciate that you think of the school district and that you support us and support the students. So thank you again. With that, we will move into instructional personnel. Recommended action, be it resolved that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, hereby appoints Dr. Jared Blair as a 1.0 FTE Director of Technology and Innovation, Administrator, Director of Technology and Innovation tenure area, at a salary of $160,000. Dr. Blair is appointed to a 4-year probationary term as a Director of Technology and Innovation commencing on July 1, 2021, and a probationary term ending on June 30, 2025. Dr. Blair has permanent certification as a school district leader.
So moved.
Second.
On the question?
On the question, I think, I don't know, Sarah, did you have something you wanted to say, or should I start off?
Well, actually, if I could turn it over to Dr. O'Connell first.
Sure.
Well, thank you. And Dr. Blair is joining us this evening, so you'll see him there on Zoom. We had a rigorous process, and I'd like Mr. Griffiths to share the rigorous process that we had in order to find Dr. Blair. So Mr. Griffiths?
Sure. It started with a posting many, many months ago. From that posting, we were able to screen many candidates. The screening process starts with a thorough review of credentials, selecting those credentials that are aligned with our district's intent, what we are looking for in the role, and then beginning an administrative interviewing process. Those screening interviews were conducted, and we were able to see almost a dozen candidates, of which we then selected people to move on to our advisory committee process. As is our tradition here in the Croton-Harmon Schools, we want to make sure that our advisory committee is representative of all of our different constituent groups. And we were able to take a look at several candidates and interview them on that evening. We were then able to have two finalists that moved on to a performance task. That performance task was to do a thorough review of our soon-to-expire educational technology, our 3-year plan, and to meet with our 3 building principals to ascertain what the anticipated needs might be for the next plan, and then present that to Dr. O'Connell and myself. From there, we were able to move the finalists to a Board of Education interview. And upon that interview, we were able to narrow down the search to our finalists, which we are very, very happy to present to the community this evening for this board resolution. Dr. Blair.
Thank you, Mr. Griffiths. And I thank you, Dr. Blair, for joining us this evening. And that's it, Ms. Carrier, unless you want us to go on some more.
And I'm sure you could. But thank you. And thank you for joining us tonight, Dr. Blair. Neil, did you have anything else you wanted to add there? You're on mute.
I just wanted to add that as a member of the board who has been through a number of searches for different personnel, whether they're building level personnel or central office administrative personnel, it's been my experience that we always go through a very rigorous process with community, and I mean student, parent, administrator, teacher, and staff participation, and this was no different. And I just also wanted to add, mainly for the public, is that this is a critical position that we are, we need somebody there immediately, somebody with knowledge, experience, commitment. I think our process drew out candidates who demonstrated that, and we, the administration has selected Dr. Blair, which I think is great, and welcome him to the district. And we will get to interact a lot more with him as time goes on. But I just wanted to add, it's not something that we could wait and say, we'll fill it in a year. There's work that needs to be done every single day, starting on July 1st. So I don't know what your summer vacation plans are, Dr. Blair, but we're we're hoping to see a lot of you. Thanks.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Oppose? Abstain? Motion carries. Congratulations and welcome to Croton Harmon, Dr. Blair.
Thank you so much. I cannot wait to get this work started. I anticipate spending the entire summer with all of you. So it's a pleasure, and I cannot wait to bring my experience and my background to everyone, but especially the students of Croton Harmon. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Looking forward to it.
We are too, Dr. Blair, and thank you for spending time with us again this week as you started the onboarding process. So you got to meet some of our critical staff at the district office, and we can't wait for you to get started.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
And now we will move on to 5.2. Sorry, excuse me, my mouse isn't cooperating with me. Now it is. Recommended action, be it resolved that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, hereby appoints Halona Deloney as a 1.0 FTE English teacher, English tenure area, at the Pierre Van Cortlandt Middle School at a salary per the next CTA contract, MA Step 1. Ms. Deloney is appointed to a 4-year probationary term as an English teacher, commencing on August 30, 2021, and a probationary term ending on August 29, 2025 in the tenure area of English. In order to be eligible for appointment to tenure, said teacher must receive at least 3 APPR ratings of effective or highly effective pursuant to Article 3012D of the Education Law during the 4-year probationary term and may not receive an ineffective rating in the final year of probation. Ms. Deloney has initial certification in English Language Arts 7 through 12.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. On the question? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Oppose, abstain, motion carries. And 5.3, recommended action, be it resolved that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, hereby appoints Robert Keene as a 1.0 FTE science teacher, science tenure area at the Croton Harmon High School at a salary per the next CTA contract, MA Step 4. Mr. Keene is appointed to a 4-year probationary term as a science teacher, commencing on August 30th, 2021, and probationary term ending on August 29th, 2025 in the tenure area of science. In order to be eligible for appointment to tenure, said teacher must receive at least 3 APPR ratings of effective or highly effective pursuant to Article 3012D of the Education Law during the 4-year probationary term and may not receive an ineffective rating in the final year of probation. Mr. Keene has professional certification in biology 7 through 12.
So
So
moved.
moved. Okay,
Second.
Brian moves. Brian moves. Andrea seconds.
All right.
Neil.
On the question? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Oppose, abstain, motion carries. And now we will move into the consent agenda. Recommended action that the Board of Education approves all items on the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
On the question? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Oppose, abstain, motion carries. And now we will move into our work session, which is a code of conduct review. And I will turn it over to our administration.
Okay, this I think is a short code of conduct review because as of this moment, and Mr. Griffiths, you might want to chime in, I do not believe the buildings have any proposed changes to the actual policy, but that the work that's being done to align with not only the code of conduct, but the mission and vision of the district. The work is mainly taking place on the handbook level. And I know there are active conversations that are ongoing, not only with faculty and staff, but at some building planning council levels. John, did you want to add anything to that?
No, you hit the nail on the head. The administrators have been looking at the code of conduct as we're looking through the language of the of code of conduct, looking at best practices of other districts steep deep in restorative practices. We did note and have communicated that it's very, very typical within the districts that the code of conducts are remaining intact. And as you said, Dr. O'Connell, a lot of that alignment to restorative practices is really being found within student handbooks. So our recommendation to the board is, we are okay with the code of conduct as is, and we are looking at always how we can increase the vibrancy of those student handbooks and have them reflect our practices as we are growing and moving into the future.
Neil?
Yes, just one thing to add, and that is, has been discussed in the policy committee, we as a board are going to await or are awaiting the final report of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Stakeholder Task Force, which is expected in June. And I know that one of the things that they will be perhaps commenting on is aligning policies, not just the code of conduct, but all policies to those efforts and those principles, which may mean that come the summer and next year, the board will be considering changes to the code of conduct as well as other policies that move that effort forward.
That's correct, Neil. And we look forward to hearing what the equity stakeholder team has to say come June. More of logistics, Neil. So we would have the hearing of the public still on the code of conduct, even if there aren't any changes to it at like a future meeting, like next month or something?
I would suggest that that probably makes sense. It gives the public the opportunity to comment if they desire on the code of conduct, even though no changes are being recommended. Normally in the past, we've had a hearing of the public when we have made changes. I see no reason not to do it now, and I see no reason not to do it in the May or June meeting, depending on what is in, what else is on the agenda.
Right. So we could, if we felt comfortable, bring it to the May, I think, is it May 6th
May
meeting?
6th meeting.
Yeah.
And then put it on there, do the hearing of the public, et cetera. That would be great, because we always like to have that shored up before we put the final touches on on the handbooks. So that would be great.
Sure. The other thing I will add is that I don't know the answer to this question. I'm just going to throw it out there, which is that if you make a change to the code of conduct, you must file, if I remember correctly, the amended code of conduct with the state education department within 30 days after the change. I assume that if you make no change, you don't have to file anything, but we should know that so we know what needs to be done after that public hearing.
Okay, thank
We
you.
can confirm that.
That's good information. Okay, so Tracy, just you've heard that. If we could make sure we have a placeholder for May 6th. Okay, so that's it for code of conduct, Sarah, for us.
All right. Did anyone else have any other thoughts, comments, questions for administration? All right, fantastic. So our next item on the agenda for our work session is a discussion of DARE. And this was something that Dr. O'Connell and Mr. Plotkin, thank you for joining us, and myself recently had a conversation with the village. So I will turn it over to Dr. O'Connell to go over that.
Thank you, Sarah. And to just start where you shared, we did meet with the village. Mayor Pugh asked for us to have a meeting whereby he shared, due to their fiscal issues, budgetary issues, that they felt they weren't in a position to contribute what they normally do to the DARE program, which was estimated at the beginning of the meeting. I think the mayor said it was about $20,000. And then later in the meeting, Chief Nikotopoulos thought it was more towards $25,000. So they did meet, and if my colleagues can listen carefully who attended the meeting, they felt that that was too difficult for them to do given their budgetary position, and they would be looking to reduce that in half. So what that meant was reducing it in half would be either the school district would contribute the other half, or we could put our heads together, which is what Mr. Plotkin also shared, to look at what that half, in terms of what they could afford, be contributed to the DARE program, and we look at perhaps a restructuring of it. So before I go any further, I think that captured the essence of what Mayor Pugh shared with us. I invited Mr. Plotkin here because, as we know, DARE is a program that is at the middle school. And so as to not have to speak for him, I wanted to invite him to the discussion this evening to share answer any questions you might have, or share any information he feels he'd like to share with the board, because DARE has been a program that's been at PBC for many, many years. So before I go any further, I'd like to offer Mr. Plotkin the opportunity to share some thoughts and, and answer any questions of the board.
Thank you, Dr. O'Connell. Good evening to the rest of you. Nice to see you this evening, especially at this time, opposed to the last time I was at a board meeting. So thanks. Appreciate it greatly. So first off, I'd like to start by just saying that, defining what the DARE program has been, what value we see in it, and then get into the area that Dr. O'Connell had mentioned. The DARE program has been a staple of the 6th grade and 8th grade experience at PVC Middle School for a number of years. This entailed lessons that the DARE officer would do weekly with the 6th grade team, going into all 6 or 5 sections of the 6th grade, depending on the size of the grade, and then culminating after a 10-week period in a DARE graduation, which evolved from more of a graduation ceremony to a carnival in which students displayed their project-based learning in the area of positive and constructive decision-making. That being said, the DARE officer also collaborated with our health teacher as well as a few other teachers to push into some of the other grades, 8th grade in health class, again, looking at the theme of good decision making at another point in a child's developmental experience at the middle school. As Deborah spoke this evening, she explained to you what we learned when we met with the village mayor as well as the village manager. Couldn't get that out, sorry. I will just say this, that we see value in this program for numerous reasons. One, not just the academic collaborative piece that also touches upon nicely the social emotional goals that we set for kids and that we set together with kids at the middle school, but also the community connection piece, that our students learn about their community and who makes up the community. And I have to say, the DARE officer, Officer Ward, is just a wonderful role model for children and a wonderful collaborator with our teachers, including the 8th grade health teacher, and the 6th grade liaison. So in our recent conversation, we were spoken to, and they let us know about their financial restraints. What I propose is that our next step would be to work with Chief Nikotopoulos, the sixth grade liaison, the health teacher, to arrive at a plan of how we run this program at the middle school, working within the financial framework set by the village. And I think there are many areas that we could talk about to cut the cost, down from the original 25,000 to work within the limits of what the village can allocate to this effort. And that's what I would like to share this evening, and I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone has.
Thank you very much, Mr. Plotkin. Does anyone have any questions?
Well,
Josh?
I have some comments and perhaps some provoking questions. I'm, so in preparation for tonight's session, I did a little bit of research into our back minutes about the DARE, in which we've discussed the DARE program as it exists in Croton in prior board meetings. And I also went out and did a little bit of research about the DARE program itself and about other programs that are out there. One of the things that I learned is that as you may recall, I think other board members will probably recall, that the way the DARE as a program has evolved significantly over the years. In fact, there is no currently run program called DARE. The actual sponsored program is called Keeping It Real. But neither of those programs are actually listed by CDC as effective at this time. CDC isn't recommending either of those programs. There are several other programs that CDC recommends that are thought to be much more effective. And there's actually never been any significant study that actually showed DARE to be effective. And from some of the things that we hear here in Croton anecdotally, I'm not surprised. I kind of wonder whether this is a wake-up call for us. Actually, that's my direct question. Is this a wake-up call for us to rethink the way we do drug abuse, alcohol abuse, and other substance abuse prevention in Croton? Is it time to look to something new and not keep using the same acronym? I really think we need to think about it a little bit more carefully. Yes, I understand that for the next year we might need to put it takes time to put a whole brand new program in place. That for the next year we might need to do something that is evolutionary as opposed to revolutionary. But I really question whether we should continue down exactly the same path that we've been using when it's clear that we still have problems with substance abuse in our schools that are much more significant than we would like them to be.
Well, if I may comment, I think what the CDC, obviously I started by talking about the two components that I find value in there. One is obviously the substance abuse and good decision making. The other is the community piece, which is having, our kids have a relationship with police officers and know other people in their community. And I would say, Josh, there's not a program in the school that we shouldn't always rethink. So I'm open, to rethinking anything and taking a really good look at that program and seeing what else is available. I also think that the CDC recommendations or what's effective doesn't account for the latter part of what I'm talking about, which is the fact that our kids are actively engaged in project-based learning around decision-making that I do think is really positive and impactful for them. So I would just say that the Croton Coalition also was involved with this, and that's why we were involved with DARE. There's a community piece there that I think is important to take in consideration. So thank you, and I appreciate your sentiments, Josh.
Josh, you're on mute.
Josh, you're muted.
I appreciate that, and I want to emphasize that any program that we were to adopt, if it was a new substance abuse prevention curriculum other than DARE, we would still want to have that community interaction component, and certainly want to have the components of good decision making.
Sure.
I just think it's something that, we've been doing this this program a long time, and sort of the anecdotal evidence seems to be that, and based on the most recent, we haven't done a survey for a while. The last time we had I think it's already been maybe 2 years since the last survey that we received, the results that we saw from the coalition.
Right.
Is
And
that
the
correct?
coalition is no longer,
Right.
active, right?
Right. But even then, it was quite clear that we still have some problems that we we need to work on, and that's a serious matter. I think we just need to think about it. I honestly, I obviously know that we can't solve that tonight, but I just kind of want to put the thoughts out there.
I think that's fair. And Josh, you've been consistent really with your statements about DARE over time, and when is there good opportunity to look at it. So thank you for sharing that.
Neil?
Yeah, I kind of agree with Josh in the sense that I haven't done as much research as Josh has on DARE and CDC comments, but what I'm thinking about is DARE evolved in terms of its structure or focus from purely a quote just say no message of perhaps 15, 20 years ago to a combination of drug use prevention and decision making, which goes far beyond drug use prevention. It goes into such things as peer pressure, gangs, a lot of other things that are not necessarily drugs. But I don't really know, and therefore I can't say for certain that there are other programs there that are better, or that there are other activities that we are doing in the district on a K-12 social emotional learning effort that are addressing these issues in a way that might be more effective than DARE or not. I think this is the kind of thing that involves, to quote a former, or use a phrase from a former board member, a deep dive into exactly what we're attempting to do, what resources we have, what resources are provided through the structure of the DARE program or other programs, and how we would integrate that into curriculum and into extra programs like DARE. And I just don't know the answer. I think that is something worthy of a study and community participation. Now, for next year, it may be, because as Josh said, evolutionary rather than revolutionary at this point in time, we may decide, and the administration may decide, that we're better off to continue along the continuum that Mr. Plotkin talked about, with the goal of really working on something that we feel would be most effective, both cost-wise and more importantly for our students. So
Andrea?
that's kind of how I see it.
Thank you, Neil.
Thank you, Neil.
I was just going to add that I think it might be a good idea to make it a work session.
I was just going to state that yes, based on this, we will certainly add it to the parking lot for future work session deep
Nice
dive.
idea. Nice idea.
But
Yes.
I would say more than that, it may evolve into something which might be more broad-based, involving community members.
Mhm.
And we can
Students,
certainly look at
staff have
Yep.
some kind of a committee with to do the research, to report, and then maybe bring it back to the board for a work session, and then a determination of strategy on how to proceed. Because I think there's a lot of people in the community who have opinions one way or the other, and we should hear that. And even a work session among ourselves is not going to hear it.
Understand. Josh, you had another
I,
comment?
I was just going to concur with Neil. I think this is something where we might want to convene an ad hoc committee to delve into a little bit more deeply.
Yep. And we can definitely look at those things. With regard to this coming year, though, I do want to just bring us back around to that. And as Dr. O'Connell said during our meeting, the village was either looking for the district to maintain that program as is and make up that difference, or work within a modified program, a smaller program, and with that smaller allocation from the village.
Sarah, I would like to basically share with you where we are.
Mhm.
And of course, if the board had a different view, please let me know. But we looked closely. As you know, you just adopted the budget. And again, even though it's an adopted budget, right, we have, the funds in our curriculum, areas, in instruction areas, et cetera. But when we look closely at them, we feel we're very tight where we are, that we would not be recommending that we split the cost, that we allow Mr. Plotkin and his team to convene with Chief Nikotopoulos and his key members to rethink what can happen for next year within the confines of what the village has allocated in terms of funding. That, coupled with what I just heard from the board tonight, might give us that time to rethink what next year could look like within the confines of what the village can financially contribute, as well as maybe use it for the time to the things you shared, where we convene either a committee, do our research, et cetera, and have a work session based on those findings. But that's where we are. As we looked more closely after that meeting at our budget to see if things could be shifted around. But, as Denise shared earlier, we are tight. And we think that would serve us well for next year.
Great. So does anyone have any other questions, comments for administration? So Dr. O'Connell, would you be looking for a thumbs up from us with regard to that?
I think that would be, really appreciated, just so that we know that we're all on the same page. And again, what it is to work with the confines of the village's, allocation, financial allocation to the DARE, or what it could look like when Mr. Plotkin, his team, and the chief work on what the specifics would be.
Great. All right. Can I see thumbs?
Thank you.
All right.
Mr. Plotkin, did that kind of sum it up and give you like next steps?
It's great. And thank you all for the feedback. And I like the idea, and I would be happy to be part of any future discussions, work sessions, or other gatherings or events around this topic.
Great. So my next step will be, I will email Mayor Pugh tomorrow, and then Michael, you will start working with Chief Nikotopoulos.
Sounds great. Thank you so
Great.
much for your time.
Thank you. And thank you, Michael, for joining us this evening.
Yes. Thank you very
Thanks.
much for joining us. Thank
Have
you.
a good night, everybody.
Have a nice
Bye-bye.
night.
Night, Michael.
All right. Well, that has concluded the work session portion of our meeting. We do have an executive session in which we expect that we will adjourn immediately following. So for any community members who are still watching with us on the live stream, thank you very much for joining us. We will, as of next, I will move that we go into executive session. So we will end our video for the evening. Recommended action that the Board of Education enters into executive session to discuss the CTA, Croton Teachers Association contract negotiations.
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Neil second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Oppose, abstain. Brian, I didn't get a hand or a.
Oh, I was an I. I was figuring
Okay.
out my mute. It was weird.
Thank you. All right. So with that, thank you very much. And I will see you all in executive session.
You will not see all of us.
Well, actually, yes,
Yep.
you're